Hey everybody, Shorty here, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm sorry for the delay of this video. YouTube kept copyright striking it every time I submitted it, and it was really annoying, so it took me a while to kind of edit it all together, and I ended up just making screenshots instead of like the usual trailers that I try to do because, again, like I said, YouTube's copyright strikes and things like that are kind of annoying. So anyway, without further ado, here's my short review for Rush Hour 3.
Whoa! Damn! I'm sorry, man. I thought this was the bathroom. Sorry. Lee, I got a big problem, man. This boy's on steroids. He got a hit. Okay, I'm about to slice you up like a giant California roll.
Funny un polaco, man.
Alright guys, we are taking a look at Rush Hour 3, the third installment in the Rush Hour series / trilogy, I guess, unless they decide to make a fourth one. But anyway, it is, again, like a comedy, action, martial arts, comedy, cop movie, I guess, directed by Brett Ratner and starring Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in the lead roles. Now, this film came out in 2007, whereas the second film came out in 2001. So we actually had 6 years in between these films, and it kind of shows a little bit, but it also maintains the highs and lows that the original films did as well, and I'll get to that in a second. So anyway, it takes place directly 3 years after the events of Rush Hour 2, and it starts off in Los Angeles, where Chris Tucker is kind of just being like a street cop. He's directing traffic and stuff, kind of gets into some funny arguments and stuff with some stripper hooker type girls. Meanwhile, Jackie Chan is attending this it's kind of like it's at the World Criminal Court, I guess. I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but certainly sounded real. But anyway, so the main Chinese ambassador guy is speaking on behalf of the criminal court, and they're trying to decide on what to do with like the triads and things like that. And on the other side of the square, I guess, a sniper sets up and takes a shot at him and hits him, but luckily he is still alive. So anyway, the whole gist of it is about these triads that are trying to assassinate the ambassador or his daughter, which is Soo Young, which is the little girl that was in the first film. And that's what this film kind of does really well. It establishes the characters and lots of plot elements and themes that were in the previous installments, which is a nice nod instead of just ignoring everything. It's great when movies do that, and I do love it and appreciate, especially the continuity aspects. So anyway, Jackie Chan tracks down the sniper, and we discover that it's his brother, and meanwhile he lets him go because he doesn't want to shoot his own brother. But this tends to backfire because later on we see that the triads are still going to come after them and shoot other people and things like that. So anyway, they end up going to Paris to follow some leads and stuff on the triads, and we discover that there's this other woman there, and later on you discover that she has the list, which is kind of like the MacGuffin of the film. She has a list tattooed on the back of her head, which lists the key triad members of the organization. So kind of like the triad is trying to kill her, and Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker are trying to save her, basically. And in the end, you kind of get a secret reveal of who the real villain is and stuff, and then there's some fights. And it all kind of culminates at the end at the Eiffel Tower, which is a cool set piece, I will say, but it reminded me a lot of how, I think it was the first film, where they're kind of climbing the rooftops and stuff like that, and then the one guy falls to his death. So it's kind of like that, except there's a little bit more bad guy stuff at the end, but we'll get into the fights and stuff later. So the ending was also very abrupt, and I think that's how the other two films were, and it's something that kind of catches you off guard, and the movie kind of felt rushed, in my opinion. No pun intended, but it did feel kind of rushed for some reason. So anyway, we'll get over that in a second. So anyway, let's go over the scores. So the story, in my opinion, I thought was just kind of average. It only took you to like 2 locations, Los Angeles for maybe the first 15 minutes of the film, and then Paris for all the rest of it. So not too much. Though we did have some really interesting characters. I especially liked the taxi driver. I believe his name was George. He provided a lot of comedy and was kind of a third character in a sense to the film, which is nice to have. Maybe I'll talk about him later. But anyway, so I gave it a 5. The music is also kind of average. I didn't feel like it was better or worse than the previous films, but I felt like the previous films had more key songs and stuff, whereas this one had weird choices for songs. Like in the middle of the film, kind of when they were in Paris, they did like a slow song where Jackie Chan and Chris Rock were singing on stage and stuff. But they didn't have any like war, what is it good for moments, so it was just kind of average. The effects, now the movie did come out in 2007, which is pretty much 10 or 11 years ago. 11 years, and you can kind of start to see where some of the effects and stuff or the green screening happened, or especially like wire works and stuff. You can kind of see that. So while it's not super good, it's also not bad or terrible. So I just gave it a 6. It was good. The fighting, I will also give a 7, definitely above average. There were some key moments that stand out. The beginning doesn't really count because that's just like a chase sequence. The middle, where they're at the dojo, fighting the giant dojo student, that was actually kind of clever, but it was more kind of just a comedy fight. It wasn't like a villain or anything like that fight. The middle parts were just kind of like shootouts, so there really wasn't too much martial arts in it at all. And really the best part of the movie was the end with the sword fight between him and his brother. Which is kind of cool because it's with a katana versus a Chinese sword. So while there weren't too many fights in it, what was there was pretty good. Oh yeah, I forgot, there is an assassin woman who shows up in the hotel, and you see her a little bit later a few times too. And that fight's good too. She uses like a fan and stuff. It's pretty cool, and daggers. But so just between those 2 fights and maybe the middle one, which is like more of a comedy fight at the dojo, there wasn't too much, but I guess the other films had that as well, so not too much going on, I guess. So it got like a 7. I mean, it's pretty solid 7. So that gives an overall score of a 6. Now, I believe I gave the second film a 7, and this film I do think is very similar to the previous installments. However, this one I think was more funny. I definitely was laughing out loud a lot more in this one, especially there's a lot of like sexual and suggestive themes and stuff going on, especially with Chris Tucker when he's in Paris with all the girls and stuff. Like it just goes, it goes like pretty over the top. I'm not sure I'm pretty sure it's PG-13, but you definitely get some comedy moments out of that. So I was definitely laughing a lot more. So I would say this film, while it didn't have as good of a story, I thought. I mean, him and his brother just was kind of glossed over too, and like a little backstory, but it was kind of just like a little paragraph of info, so it wasn't too in-depth or anything. But this film definitely had the comedy elements more so than the previous films. However, I think the previous ones still kind of stand out for very, very marginally. They're better. So overall, the film got a 6 from me, and if they do decide to make a 4th film, I will definitely check it out because, it's a good series. You guys should check it out, especially if you like Jackie Chan, before he becomes like old man Jackie Chan, I guess. But he's still looking good. Don't get me wrong. I still love him. All right, anyway, I'll see you guys later.